Welcome to Season 3 of the Knowledge from the Couch podcast. More history, more people, more of the stuff that got you here in the first place. Thanks for listening.
1, 2, 3, jump!
Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome into the Knowledge from the Couch podcast. This is episode number 51, you guys, and we've crossed that hump since last week. I hope you all enjoyed last week's episode. It was fun as hell for me to do, and I obviously hope to continue having more and more people on to talk a little bit about history with me and just go through that entire thing. This week's episode, you guys, is another 3 in a row. Magic 3, the hat trick, 3 in a row of guests on. And this week, we talk with Mike Bettendorf, a good buddy of mine from a long time ago and all the way up to today. We are going to talk about Johannes Gutenberg, the master of the printing press, the mobile type, the whole entire thing. We are going to talk about that because Mike is an avid reader and writer, and he can probably honestly contribute his like of those things and even some of his livelihood, as we'll talk about a little bit during the show, to Johannes Gutenberg, making that print and press work, making a whole bunch of Gutenberg Bibles, and having a heck of a time in Germany in the 1400s. So, guys, I won't talk a whole heck of a lot more. I just wanted to intro this particular portion. Guys, episode number 51 of the Knowledge from the Couch podcast, Johannes Gutenberg. Guys, stick with us. All right, guys, so welcome back into the Knowledge from the Couch podcast. This is another crazy episode. When I first started doing this, I didn't imagine that I was going to do so many guest spots in a row. I kind of felt like they were going to be periodic here and there, occasionals, and then for some reason, after I did the episode with Amber, the floodgates seemed to open up wide for me. And this is my third guest in a row. Now, I'm not sure if I'll have any more for a little bit after this, but hey, if you want to come on the show, please let me know, just like this guy did. He listened to the first episode that I had guest with my sister Amber, and then while I was recording the show with Aaron from last week that you will remember, he messaged me and asked me if I would be able to record this week here super quick and get an episode out. And of course, I obliged him, so here we are in episode 51. We've now passed the crest up to 100 episodes. We have plenty of those left to go. It's going to be another year or so before we get there, but we will get there. And I want to welcome my third guest, maybe the fanciest of the guests that I've had, the best beard for sure of the three people that have been here before. Amber is incapable of growing one. Aaron can grow an excellent beard, but for some reason this time of year he does not have one, so of course Mike wins by default. The Mike I am speaking of course, is Mike Bettendorf. Mike, how are you, sir?
Hey, I'm doing fantastic. Yeah, it's good. Well, it's Thanksgiving break, man. I don't have to be at work.
That's right.
Today,
so tell the people a little bit about what you do for a living, what you do for work, kind of all that stuff. Let people know a little bit about you in general.
Yeah, so I work with the school system here in Lincoln, LPS. I mentor children, and essentially I work one-on-one with kids that they test higher than their grade. Like it's average of like two academic grades higher
above where they would the average child of their age is at.
Yep, exactly. So because of that, I don't know how the testing works, but anyway, these kids are tested, and if they qualify and want to be in the mentor program, they get assigned a mentor, and I mentor them in the subject of language arts, and it's pretty cool. We get to do a lot of things that they might not get to do
normally during the curriculum that they're assigned in their whatever, in LPS's whatever it is for whatever grade they're in.
Yeah, exactly. So basically, instead of going to English class, they come to me and we do just all sorts of stuff. I mean, my focus in college was like literature and writing, specifically creative writing. So I try to put that bend on it for the students because, I mean, when I was in school, like we didn't do that. Like I didn't take a creative writing class until I was in college. So
where did you went to Norfolk High School?
Yeah.
Correct.
Yep.
So if you're a non-Nebraskan, Norfolk is it's spelled Norfolk, but none of us Nebraskan folk y'all call it that. It's Norfolk, and it's about 2-ish hours or so away from the capital where we are right now in Lincoln, Nebraska. Smallish community, 25, 30,000-ish people up there. Reasonably large high school, though, although that's because it's the only game. Well, not the only game in town, but the big one. There's Kearney Catholic, I think, as well. The Kearney Catholic, Norfolk, because it's Norfolk Central Catholic or something of that. Yeah, there are many Catholic schools in the state of Nebraska, and you tend to mix them up from who is who and which is which. But there tends to be, if you're in a town with a big school, there's also like a tiny Catholic school that also just hangs out next to you and just like is really good at sports because they can. It's a private school, so they can recruit, basically. But so you went to Norfolk High School. Did you have AP or advanced placement classes at Norfolk at the time that you were in school?
Yeah, we had AP classes. We didn't have the IB program up there, but the AP program was there. I didn't take AP English. I
did. Your boy here over here took AP English. You know what's up.
I took 4 years of every subject.
Yeah.
I took AP Physics, actually.
Good for you. I'm shitty at physics, so good for you for getting through that somehow.
Yeah,
excellent.
Somehow. But then I actually took a lot of college classes in high school. Like I took college math, and then we had like a technology program, like affiliated with Northeast Community
College.
Yep. And so that's actually what I was planning on doing in college, was like computer science and that kind of thing. It's one of those things where like I thought that's what I wanted to do, and then for like freshman year of college, I was like, "Fuck this."
Yeah, it's a little tougher than it seems, or sometimes your brain or even yourself, you don't know exactly what something entails, so you see this generalized weird picture of something. You're like, "Oh, that would be something I'd be really into. It's cool," and then you get into it, and you're like, "This is fucking nothing like I thought it was gonna be." Like, I have a similar story. Like when I went to high school, we had AP class and stuff too. I took AP English and AP History, which that one ended up, I guess, working out for my first degree in history. I continued doing that one forever. And we had a ton of other ones too. But like towards the end of high school, as I was thinking about stuff like I was thinking about being into, I really thought maybe like being a psychologist of some sort would be interesting to me. So when I first got to the University of Nebraska here in Lincoln, I was a psych major, and I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know what it all was about. I just said, hey, if you're a major in psychology, in my head, anybody who was involved in psychology was like a therapist or a clinical person of some sort.
Yeah.
Not really thinking about the fact that probably the vast majority of psychology major people are researchers for the most part, doing research, either carrying out other people's research that have come up with stuff or, developing their own research. A lot of academic spots in psychology. Not nearly as many of the psychology majors actually became like clinical psychologists or therapists or counselors of any way. I mean, it's part of it, but I didn't know like any of this shit because I mean, when I went to school, nobody fucking told me anything.
Yeah, right.
And you have this weird idea of what it's going to be. So then I switched my major halfway through to history, also not really knowing exactly what I was going to do in life. And then, you know, with that degree, I've now dicked around for a billion years, it feels like, and then finally made a podcast, and that's my crowning jewel achievement of my my history degree. I feel like it's the only time in my life that I've ever applied what I did in college at some point, you know, minus what I just did in college. That's a whole separate thing, to anything later in life. Because when I graduated school the first time, I didn't do jack shit compared to what I wanted to do or what I did in school. And I feel like your story is pretty similar. So you're saying you went to Norfolk High School, you had an interest in computer science, but also you were, you know, you like to read, you like to write, you like to just be for those of you who don't know, John has, you know, siblings, or Mike has siblings, John and
Mira.
Yep. And all of you, whether or not you're, you know, 100%, you know, blood related or not, have a very creative bone in your body. You all do it a little differently. But like Mira has like her photography and she played an instrument so well. You know, John is a good writer as well, but he's kind of put his talents towards teaching and stuff. But he's a very like artistic guy as well, which, you know, his wife who did the art for my podcast page, very artistic as well. So like it kind of falls, and like you guys are all drawn to, you know, the arts pretty much. Like just it's kind of a strange thing. You guys are all just you all kind of meander your way over there, whether you like it or not. It seems to just be part of your DNA.
Yep.
So you went to college, or did you started at UNO, correct?
Yeah. My freshman year was at UNO in Omaha, and then for like a bunch of different reasons, I decided to transfer after my freshman year. In fact, when I was in Omaha, you probably remember this because that's when we met. I actually spent more time in Lincoln than I did in Omaha. And I was living in Omaha, doing school in Omaha, but I drove to Lincoln, I think pretty much right after class on Thursday or whatever, for that first semester. And I would stay in John's apartment
like the entire weekend.
Yeah, I'd stay from like Thursday night until sometimes Monday morning. Like
before you'd go to class.
Yeah, I drove. I remember one night having to drive, or one morning, I guess, driving in the winter, like some bullshit blizzard. I had to drive to make it to class, and I was just like, why the fuck did I even do this? Like, I should have just stayed. But anyway, yeah, I was doing the Peter Hewitt Institute. They have like a big computer science and engineering program over there. And I was doing management information systems, which basically mixes business and computer science.
Yeah.
Because turns out a lot of computer scientists don't know how to interact with people. Who would have fucking thought?
That was the entire joke in what was it, Office Space, about the middleman who the engineers don't know how to talk to anybody. That's what I do. Because what would you say he does here? That's exactly what he does. And you're right. I mean, sometimes when your brain is switched and made in such a way where you are excellent and even like maybe people call like genius level at some shit like that, you know, everybody's brain is finite, you know, sometimes that takes away parts of the other, you know, for interaction, you know, and not saying that that's the way everybody is, but obviously that can happen sometimes. There is a reason, obviously, why sometimes those stereotypes ring a little bit more true, you know, when you're thinking about it. So you're in MIS at UNO and you're a freshman.
Yep.
And I believe we met because your brother, John, did judo with me and a bunch of other people, and we just randomly had met through that. And then you would come up because John, you know, was having you come up and hang out with us, and you did a little bit of that stuff with us, but you started to hang out with our friend group as well, and then you started to sort of integrate from that point forward. Yeah.
Yeah, and so pretty much, I mean, I decided, I don't even think the first semester was over at UNO before I decided, like, yeah, I got to get out of here. I got to move. And I mean, there was a lot of different reasons for it. It was just weird living situation at the time. And like, just wasn't enjoying class. And I figured, well, all my friends are in Lincoln now. So So I just kind of like buckled through that first year and then moved. And I was actually torn between doing like graphic design for a long time. And then, so I was kind of torn between graphic design and maybe going towards the like tattoo artist route. Actually was something I wanted to do.
Thinking about, yeah.
I was also super into music.
Yep.
So I was thinking, I can, design album art and that kind of thing. And really, like any art, you have to devote a certain amount of time. And for whatever reason, I was a dumb, like 18-year-old. I just didn't devote a lot of time to like fine art. And eventually I moved over into English, and like I was more willing to devote time to like writing and reading and like learning that craft than I was the fine art, even though I do have a fine art minor. I don't do much other than like doodle and shit
And stuff.
But, like,
yeah.
But,
you happened to take enough classes while you were doing it to pick it up, but not really such an intentional thing when it all came down to it.
Yeah, like I have a rudimentary understanding of a lot of concepts and things like that, enough to talk with people about, but other than that, I mean, I don't practice it very much. Like the last few times I've actually done any sort of art was, other than doodling, like I doodle all the time.
Yeah.
It's just the way
it's just a thing you do. It's just kind of almost a nervous tick anymore. You just have a pencil in your hand or a pen and you just draw. It's a thing you do.
But the only other time I really do anything was actually when our last guinea pig died. I painted a big old picture of him, kind of like that classic Biggie Smalls picture with the crown. I did it because we used to call him Piggy Smalls. So, but other than that, like that's about.
And that was
extent.
Inspiration striking you, or having a reason to do something.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you never really had a good reason in your head, at least, to do anything like that. So you say, "Well, I'm never gonna draw a bunch of shit because why should I? I don't have any reason to do so. There's other stuff to do."
Exactly, and I just kind of fell into creative writing in college, and that's pretty much like I didn't actually do a whole lot of creative writing in high school. I read. I mean, I've always been a reader. Like thanks to my mom for that. She gave us a book every year for Christmas, and just one of those things. We're a family of readers. Just kind of the way it is.
I think that's a positive thing. I think reading, just even passively, just kind of reading every once in a while is an excellent use of your brain space, because you're going to get, an active exercise of your brain, not only just reading words, but comprehending what's being said, weaving the story into your own mind's eye of like what's happening, and it's always kind of interesting when you read a book before it becomes like a movie at some point, and kind of comparing like what you thought something would look like in your brain as opposed to what it turns out on screen, somebody else's vision of it. And then when you read books afterwards, that's all you can see is like the movie version of it. Like if I ever read Harry Potter, all I can see is like the Daniel Radcliffe as Harry Potter. Like I just see those characters. They did such a good job with it. I'm just like, well, because I read Harry Potter and stuff before it was movies, at least because they started making them like while she was still writing. But I remember reading the first 2 or 3, whatever, before they started making the movies in general. Having a slightly different vision of it. But the second that they made those movies, I was like, well, this is just it. That's just, it is what it is now.
Yeah. That,
but besides that point, reading is a great way to like, exercise your brain in that way. And then you pick up, you'll expand your vocabulary a great deal.
Right.
And if I feel like, I think everybody says this, but it's totally true. If you want to be a good writer, you have to be a pretty avid reader. I don't think I've ever met a person, maybe somebody exists, some shitty writer who just puts out just garbage content, like maybe L. Ron Hubbard or some shit. Rest in peace, not really. Writing shit like Dianetics and stuff. I mean, I can't see that guy being like a fucking prolific reader by any means. So I'm sure there are people out there who write and are just garbage writers and don't. But for the most part, if you've ever, read an author's work, that author's probably read 10, 15 times as much literature in their brains as they ever wrote.
Right. Yeah. Like, I mean, I follow a ton of writers and so on and so forth on Twitter and things like that. And like, you can make what you want of like what works best for you, how to write well. Like, there's all sorts of like, this is what writers should do. And like, I don't really pay attention to most of that stuff. I think a lot of writers, like, what works for you, like, as long as you know what works for you, do it. Yeah. And be diligent about it. But like, the one thing I am very firm in is almost every single writer will be like, if you don't read, then
you're gonna be a shitty writer.
Yeah, or you're not as good as you could be.
Yeah, you're missing any kind of potential that you could have unlocked had you just spent some time reading other people's works.
Well,
you know,
I mean, I've written things where, like, I know some people are like, yeah, while I write, if I'm working on a book, they might not read anything at the time because they don't want to be influenced and that kind of thing. But like, I mean, there's so many times where I'll just be reading something and I'm like, oh shit, like there is an answer that I wasn't thinking about for a project I'm working on that comes about because I was reading something else.
Yep.
Or, you know, like writing to me, a lot of it is just problem solving and a lot of it is just, I mean, storytelling is pretty much problem solving in a lot in a creative way, basically. Yeah. But
yeah, you come with a story that you want to tell, and then you have to, you know, instead of saying, you know, in outline form, hey, this is a story about these three people, and this and this and this, and this is how this person meets, and then eventually this is what happens at the end. You have to, you know, embellish it a little bit, make a narrative, and make a story that makes sense to solve whatever problem you've come through. You know, maybe saying, oh, I want this person to do this eventually, or I want these two people to have this kind of interaction, or whatever. Then you have to write your way into it, which can be tough. I mean, it's not like writer's block isn't a thing. You know, that happens to every single writer to ever exist. I mean, besides maybe Stephen King, if that guy has writer's block, dude, he's a prolific writer. He's pumped out a vast swath of works. It's like he never stops writing. So
yeah, well, and it's funny you say that. I still haven't read his book on writing, which I need to. I need to. I hear it's amazing. And I actually I don't read a whole lot of King. It's one of those guys I've been meaning to get into more.
Famous for a reason, but obviously not everybody's read everything he's written and ever. So
like my reading list is just insanely
it's more
long.
astronomical than you could probably ever actually accomplish in your life.
Oh, absolutely. But King, part of the reason he's able to like put out as much as he does is he has an extremely rigid writing schedule that he sticks to, and that is so much of it. And I mean, something I've been really shitty about actually the last couple months. I haven't really written nearly as much as I would want to. I've been busy doing other things and all that. But like King's got like his mindset is, I think he writes like certain number of words a day, which I know some people, they say do 1,000 a day, which if you're writing a typical document, 1,000 words is 5-ish pages. Yeah. It might not sound like a lot, but
it's something. I mean, if you knock that out for 10 straight days, that's 50 pages. You knock it out for 100 days, 500 pages of work. That's a lot in a third of a year, you know? So,
and he has a routine and he sticks to it. And I mean, not that this is an excuse, granted his success has allowed him to be like, to keep that routine.
It's his job and he can dedicate 100% of his time to the craft that he has made it for himself.
Exactly. And like, so like if you're just starting out writing or trying to dabble in it, like if you can't keep that kind of routine, like don't beat yourself up, because that's something that I'm really bad at. Like I beat the shit out of myself all the time about not keeping goals or not keeping it. But I mean,
because you want to be a writer. I mean, obviously I know I've talked to you many times and I understand that that's definitely what you want to be, and you've been published at least the one time I've seen here lately. I'm sure it's been more than that, but you know, I know you want to continue to expand upon that stuff. So I can understand why sometimes it feels like you're either running up, you know, a hill made of molasses, where you just literally feel like you're not going anywhere despite how hard you're working, or you know, either way you feel like, well, if I just did this, then maybe I would be able to pop over the hill, but I didn't do it. I'm just a piece of shit. You know, we all have those same like self-doubt thoughts, you know. It's kind of, so I think it is good advice just to say, you know, it's okay to backslide sometimes. It's okay not to do exactly what the things you are. Eventually you'll figure out your style and you'll make your way into it the way you want to.
Yeah,
you know?
Absolutely. Like, I mean, yeah, pretty much. Like, you have to be hard on yourself to an extent, but I mean, don't be your own whipping boy, you know? Yeah. Like you can only like, you know, you can only expect so much out of yourself. And
I feel like it's all about setting realistic goals.
Yep.
I think a lot of people's problem, and you know, I've kind of learned this over the past 4 or 5-ish years that I've been doing stuff in my life, that when I was a lot younger, you get this really a grandiose thought of life, and you go, you know, like say you graduate high school and you're going to college, you go, I'm going to go to college and I'm going to graduate with this degree and I'm going to get a job doing this. Very general, broad goals. They're very far off that there are so many little things that can happen in between time. They do happen. You know, they happen to you, they happen to me, they happen to John, they happen to everybody, where stuff gets in the way and you don't accomplish it, and then you feel like a failure in the end. And you aren't. It's just that the goal you set was so grandiose, so broad, so non-specific that, I mean, if you solved it, if you were to accomplish that goal, it's almost like by accident that you just happened to like get lucky and do whatever you did on the way to get to that point. You know? So and I always say to people, you know, the best thing I can think of is, you know, just make little goals that are, you know, measurable, so you know if you got it or not, and you can kind of see where you are, and specific, you know, where you say, hey, I'm gonna, like your Stephen King example, he might make a goal, say, okay, I'm going to sit down at my typewriter today and I'm going to type out 1,000 words, and that's going to be my goal today. It's measurable, it's 1,000 words, easy to figure out if you did that or not. And today, so it's timely, you know, hey, I'm going to do that today. And you off and running, and it's pretty easy to say, hey, you know, I made my goal and I did it, or I missed it. What can I do to like modify myself to like either start accomplishing this goal more often, or maybe I should like lower my expectations a little bit, start achieving those goals, and then build as you go, you know, continually to do what you want to do. And eventually you build those in blocks and you get to wherever you want to be.
Right.
You know?
Exactly. And like keeping them malleable is a huge part of it. Cause like for a while, excuse me.
No, you're fine.
I was cranking out 1,000 words a day sometimes. And it felt awesome. Like you, at the end of the day, you're just like, I am fucking doing this. This is
you're
great.
like, I'm writing. Look at all the shit I made. Yeah.
But then like, I mean, shit happens. You don't
gets
feel
in the way.
well or whatever excuse,
many things that could or can or will happen.
Yeah. And like for a while I was like, shoot, if I can get 100 words a day, I'll be happy. Like, and then this last year and a half or so, like the goal, I didn't like write it down or anything, but it was just kind of up in my head. I was like, hey, I'm going to start submitting to
little publishers,
like journals and stuff.
Journals,
yeah, because like my grand big goal would be I'd want to get like novels published and things like that. And like I've written novels, some of them will never see the light of day. They're awful.
I think a lot of writers have a lot of stuff in their writing closet that will never ever see the light of day beyond what you had in your brain, and you'll be the only one who ever knows what it is. And
like sometimes it's good to just get that crap out and then it's gone. You know, but so I have some finished work, but then I don't really do for a while I wasn't working on short pieces, and over the last year or so I was like, hey, I'm gonna take some time to write just like some flash fiction, which generally is like no more than 1,000 words. Like they're pretty short, 2, 3, 4
pages at the most, pretty easy, quick read, which I think is its own. It sounds easier because it's less, but it really isn't, because then you have to make a story that has an impact and has a beginning, middle, and end that goes somewhere in a very short amount of time. I feel like that would almost be more difficult than writing like an expositional, like 500-page novel where you can meander around everywhere. When you got to make a story happen in 3 fucking pages, that seems its own kind of tough to me.
Yeah, it's its own thing. Like you have to, your real estate is very limited. And it's one of those things where you don't, with a story, you worry about character development. You worry about plot and all that. Whereas like with flash fiction, I mean, it's all about that action and like getting, and I don't mean action like, a car chase or some shit.
But it's making a lot happen. It's very dense. Right?
Yeah. Like you have to get stuff out quickly, and it has to grab attention and be gone.
And it has to be like good too. Like you can't just be like, bam, and then like hope people like listen to you. It's like you need to like come with something like interesting and like, oh shit,
right?
And they read your thing for the 3 or 4 pages and they go, oh, that was a nice little story. I'm really glad that I read something like that.
Right.
Know? Hopefully that's the goal.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the last year I said, hey, I'm gonna do more of that kind of thing. And like you mentioned, I did get one small piece published recently, which is cool.
Yeah,
It's
I'll link that in the show notes of the podcast, and when I post it, I'll link Mike's work here so that people can take a look at it if they want to read some of your stuff.
Oh, thanks, man.
Yeah, and what was the journal that you were published in?
It's called The Weird Reader.
Mm-hmm.
It's a small outfit out of Utah.
Yep.
I think I'm in their 3rd volume, so I think they've got 3 volumes right now, and it's kind of a mixture of.
It's almost like, because I read your work and I thought it was very good. When you read it, it's not like Shel Silverstein, but I kind of think of it like that because it's like a book of just a lot. You like turn the page and you read a couple pages of a story, and then you turn the page again. There's another story by a different artist,
Yep.
So it's like a compendium of like many little stories that you can just kind of open up and say, hey, and then just read them and kind of get a little taste of stuff as you go through.
Yeah, it's like an anthology, pretty much. And that's how a lot of like academic journals are and literary magazines. It's just a huge collection of,
like you said, flash fiction, flash pieces.
There's flash fiction, short fiction, which
a little longer than what
kind
you're
of
writing.
varies. And then oftentimes they'll include like photography or fine art too. A lot of them are doing that these days, which I think is great.
Yeah, it's kind of a fun little expansion of the art, in a different terms than just the written word.
Absolutely. And I've submitted last week or 2 weeks ago, I submitted like 5 different pieces.
Nice.
I'm just like, all right,
see something sticks.
Let's see what happens.
Was that piece that you had published, is that your first published piece of work?
Yes.
Nice.
Technically.
Congratulations.
Well, thank you.
You got to get the first one, and then you can continue to build off that one. So
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's my first bit of like fiction that was published. I did a lot of like comics criticism for a while.
Yep. So like opinion writing.
Yeah. It was kind of a mixture of opinion or analytical pieces is kind of what it was. And I did that for a while. And yeah, it's still cool. I just don't have time right now to do that kind of work anymore. I'm still involved in like comics and that kind of area of things, but I don't write a whole lot about that stuff anymore. Maybe someday. I'll do it
maybe
again,
someday.
but.
And I know you and I talked many times before this and off mic, even when I was first starting this show, about how you also have interest in writing like an audio drama type thing, which will be it's going to be its own bag of worms when it comes down to it. So I can't link you to anything because we haven't made it yet. I say we because I feel like I'm going to be involved at least a little bit in this project. So get ready for that. But it may still be a while down the road. But that's just another way to expand upon what you're interested in creatively and stuff. It's written, but it's in audio form, so that's a whole other media that you get to play around in and stuff. So that'll be kind of interesting too. So that won't probably necessarily be published anywhere, but it'll be self-published. Like I self-publish myself every week with this show. And it's my own thing. And we'll get that out there, and people will be able to listen to that as well, which may open up its own avenues.
I hope so. It's that. I mean, that came about. To be honest, the reason I started writing that, I don't even have a title for it yet.
Yeah.
Like each episode is titled, but like the overall story
it doesn't have its own finite title yet.
The reason I started that is I had finished a book. It took me about a year. I wrote a book and took like pretty much a month off. I just didn't have anything else in me to like really do. I started working on another piece that I just couldn't get off the ground, and I was just frustrated. And I was like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm gonna write this goofy sci-fi noir thing. Yeah. And it happened.
Yeah. So you have it all. You have it all written.
The first
pretty well, or a good draft of it.
Yeah.
Done.
The first. I mean, I think overall, all the episodes together are like a combined 70,000 words or so. So it'd be, or not 70,000 words. That's a lot.
That's a lot. Yeah.
It'd be about 70 pages rather. So
okay.
It's probably
like a novella size.
Probably 25, 30,000 words altogether. And yeah, novella size. And it takes place in like the same universe of the book that I had finished, but there's only one crossover character, and it's really brief and subtle, and they don't have to go together at all. It's just one of those like very like Douglas Adams kind of like
Hitchhiker's Guide.
kind of strange and like goofy. But I also read and watch a lot of like crime stuff. So it just, whether I mean it to or not, it slips into my writing. Like, oh, some shit's gonna happen, and like, you know, whatever. So it kind of has like a weird, goofy, like fun vibe to a lot of it, but it also has a lot of the existential dread and kind of things that happen in noir stories and stuff like that. And there's like a little bit of crime here and there, and like,
and set in like, you know, like space and stuff, which is its own kind of sci-fi flavoring on top of it.
And the way I was talking with a friend of mine who his name's PJ. He's one of my best friends, and he's one of the reasons I kept writing. Actually, we met him at the right time in my life, in college, and we just spent a lot of time hanging out, talking stories, reading stories,
just bouncing stuff off of each other.
And the way he always describes sci-fi, he's like, there's two kinds of sci-fi. There's like your shiny, brand new, nice sci-fi, like akin to maybe Star Trek.
Yeah.
And then there's your like dirty, gritty sci-fi, which maybe Firefly.
Yeah, or like The Expanse. More like, recently.
Yeah, something like
stuff
that.
That's gritty and not at all like it's like you say, clean and not clean. Like clean, like very utopian in nature, very fancy, very like clean lines, bright, shiny shit.
And like technology might not be technology might be kind of shitty still. Like, hey, we still use guns with actual bullets, not lasers or photons.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
like some shit where like it mixes stuff that you're familiar with and everything.
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay.
And like ships are rusty and you know, things like that. And this story, I don't know. It's not really either of those in a lot of ways. It's just, I guess a lot of the ways I like to write sci-fi, and maybe this is me being lazy, I don't know, but you know how like in a lot of like Douglas Adams or Grant Naylor's work, who he did Red Dwarf. And actually Grant Naylor is the combination of two writers.
It's like the pseudonym is of two different people.
Yeah.
With a pen name.
I can't remember their names right now, but those two guys together did Red Dwarf. And anyway, like they probably lean more on the like grittier side and like unclean kind of thing, but they're also just kind of like, there's not a lot of science in the science fiction, you know. It's just kind of like strange and goofy.
Fanciful,
or like Doctor Who, exactly.
Yeah, just the science isn't the point. It's just part of the narrative a little bit, but the point is like the character interactions and the weird shit that happens between them while they exist in this like absurd reality.
Right.
You know?
It's almost like so many people are going to hate me for this, but like science fantasy, and I like sci-fi and fantasy are very, very, very different in a lot of ways.
But sometimes a lot of people combine the two in various ways, you know, so it's not a complete leap.
Yeah, like the science and science fiction for me, it's more of a conduit to tell the like goofy shit that I want to say.
And it really all depends on like how scientific you want to be. Like some people write to be like, you know, this is as sciencey as I want it to be. Like The Martian is you could technically probably call that a science fiction novel, and he tries his best. The author's name escapes me now as well, but I read that book after having seen the movie, and it's actually pretty well done. It's very interesting. It's compelling. He tries to be very sciencey, and if you ever see the movie, it's kind of like that too. It's like we try to be as hopefully realistic as we can be within the bounds of stuff to like tell our narrative. So like the fiction part is very driven by the science part. But like you're saying, sometimes you can really start to bend the rules, and like it just becomes another like template that you can use to tell your stories, and you can bounce stuff off of it. It doesn't have to be like, well, he didn't do all the calculations properly, like a Neil deGrasse Tyson like this on your fucking work, you know, say, oh, it's inappropriate. Well, of course it's inappropriate because most people don't intend for it to be 100% accurate to like physics and stuff.
And like I try to be, in some of the things that happen, like I try to be accurate to an extent. Like
you do the best you can to be reasonable with whatever that means to you.
For me, the suspension of disbelief it's just something you have to have when reading fiction.
Yeah.
Like
that's the fiction part. It's
exactly
fiction.
Like I'm not writing.
It's not nonfiction. Like you're telling a story that happened. It's a story you made up. You know.
Right, and it's like it's not about the science. It's about the characters
the
and
characters
the other stuff,
the way they get together, and the things that affect
and how they
those
interact.
Characters.
And
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. Well, it's interesting, right? How you can just start ho-humming it at the beginning, and then 35 minutes later, you still haven't got into the subject of your podcast yet. I think that's the beauty of it, personally, because I just like to, if you're going to be a guest on the show later on after you listen to this episode with the other two that I've done with people, this is kind of what I want from you. I like to, and I hope the people who are listening like it as well, to like get into the people I have on a little bit. And, it's not like I have any celebrities on. I'm not a celebrity. Nobody else that I know is. But I still think that you guys are all interesting people in your own different ways. Like everybody's got something weird shit about them or cool stuff, that I think people should know about. So it's fun, I think, to exposition a little bit. And very fortunately, just like the first two episodes I had, I talked to Amber a lot about her interests, and those kind of led into the story that we told. And Aaron talked about radio, that led into the story that we told. And very similarly in this episode, what we've been talking about for the past nigh on half an hour really leads pretty well into talking about this gentleman and telling a little bit of a story about that guy, because without him, and that could be probably argued a little bit, but probably without his particular type of invention and the spread of that, we wouldn't have so much easy access, or the world wouldn't have had so much easy access to literature that helped boom that sort of thought science for many hundreds of years, not just with creativity, but for people to put out literature to be read by others. The American Revolution would be a lot different many hundreds of years after this guy if you can't write pamphlets and put that shit out to get support from those people, like get the fervor of the people. Without stuff to read and distribute, you just fucking can't. I mean, you can be a town crier, but your range is 15 to 20 meters probably, whereas a written word can go anywhere, as far as you want it to go and reach somebody's, brain that way. So, today we are going to now discuss, after many, many minutes of hanging out and just chit-chatting like buddies, we're going to talk about Johannes Gutenberg. And you've probably, not Steve, not the actor, Steve Gutenberg, who you've all seen. And I can't even think of the movies that he's in now, but he was so fucking prolific in like the 80s and shit. Steve Gutenberg was in like every fucking movie.
The one that comes to mind most is just It Takes Two.
It Takes
because
Two.
Of my age. Because of my age, I would imagine. But then actually most recently that I know, and this was years ago, was his cameo in Party Down.
Yeah, a show that I never watched, but I'm familiar with, with Adam Scott and others who are very funny people who I love watching their work. It was kind of like a lot of these people's pre-work before they all kind of blew up and became
it was
more
like,
famous.
I can't
Jane
remember.
Lynch, I believe, was in it.
Lindsay, is it Lindsay? She's in. I can't remember her name.
We can't remember, but Party Down,
Party
and
Down.
Steve Gutenberg just appears.
It's hilarious. Anyway,
that's all we're going to talk about Steve Gutenberg, though, because that is the probably the only Gutenberg some people have ever heard of. But this Gutenberg you probably should have heard of.
This is true.
By the name of Johannes, a very German man. He's got a long old German name, but we don't really need to say it because Jesus Christ, who cares? If you talk about Johannes Gutenberg, you should be talking about this particular gentleman. So I'll let Mike take it a little bit from here, but that's the subject, and he is a very important man in the history of writing. So Mike, tell me a little bit about Johannes. Start from the beginning. Let's see what we can unpack with this dude.
Let's see here. He was born, give or take, actually. They don't know.
Yeah, it's in that era where nobody really knows when anybody's born. You just have to take somebody's word for it, basically.
Most people just say roughly 1400. It's speculated maybe 1394-ish. Or maybe even 1404, like that 10-year gap. Like
that is kind of a gap, isn't it? It's not like, maybe 1399 or 1401. Like, nope, maybe 1394, maybe 1405. Who fucking knows?
Yep.
Who knows? 10 years.
We're just gonna call it 1400.
We'll call it 1400 and call it even.
And he lived until February 3rd of 1468. So, I mean, a pretty decent life.
Yeah, so he may have been 68 years old, or maybe like 75 or something, or maybe like 50-something.
Right.
But he did live a pretty good life, especially for that period of time, yes.
Yeah. So he was a German blacksmith, goldsmith, printer, and publisher. One of those, did a lot of things.
Kind of a jack of all trades, really.
Yeah. He introduced printing to Europe with his printing press. You've probably heard of the 42-line Gutenberg Bible. That was like his big thing. the 42 line is there's 42 lines per page, and
Yep.
it like looked really nice, and like it was very readable, that kind of thing. So that was like his big thing. He supposedly is the first European to use movable type in 1439. There's some controversy on that, but we'll worry about that in a little bit.
Yeah, in a little bit.
So in general, they say some of his contributions to printing would be like the invention of a process that uses movable type to like mass produce.
Yeah, so talk a little bit about that in general, because humans have been able to write language for a decent chunk of time before this. I mean, easily for that in the entire common era from I guess 0 to 1400. That's 1400 years of writing, and many years going back before that. Humans have been able to speak for a very long time and have spoken language, but it wasn't until like cuneiform and shit with the Sumerians and stuff where they're like, oh, maybe if we just like have symbols and like Egyptian hieroglyphs and stuff, maybe if we have symbols that represent what we're saying, then eventually we can, like, for posterity, record what people say and tell stories about what people say. But the drawback to that was you just had to write, so that's all there was. So I feel like there was a lot of things back then where it was like there was whole specific occupations where all people did was copy. Literally write shit and copy stuff like word for word, and that's how you like made a document.
Well, I think I don't have the note somewhere, but anyway, there's to get a Bible specifically at the time. It would take like a year for
somebody to literally
write
like
it.
copy out another one that they have, or like a copy thing, like a manuscript, and they would copy it word for word, write it out the way it was going to be, bind it up, and make it into a book, and like, here you go.
Yep, and it was super expensive. So
yeah, because I wouldn't want to spend a fucking year just literally writing word for word something myself without being a little bit compensated, for that work.
Yep. But yeah, the movable type, like back earlier in like printing and things, you could do like reliefs and stuff, where you'd like
you'd make a whole thing.
Yeah, like a whole big wood block or something.
And then you would like put ink or whatever on it and make it. So you could distribute that, but that still also takes an amount of time to make that relief. And it's only good for whatever that relief is, so you could build a relief. But if you made an entire relief of like the Bible, let's say, that relief might take up your entire fucking shed, on different wood blocks that you have to put ink on. So it's like, well, you can maybe mass produce this a little bit more, but at the same time, like, it's still kind of a fucking annoying. It's still going to take a while for us to like do the shit that we do, you know?
So like the movable type was his way of like making that process way more efficient. And it was like, they would take metal, and like think how like a typewriter, they're called a matrix, like the little metal thing would have a letter on it.
Yeah.
And then it would be stamped
and then
things
to a piece of paper or parchment or something.
And those letters could be rearranged and moved and used over and over and over, and you could form your own words and all that. It's kind of like the very like layman, very base way of how that process works. But so like if you've ever seen a typewriter, like all of those little keys or whatever have the basically a little matrix on it, and then they get lunged forward onto the ribbon, which is soaked with the ink, and then it like stamps it onto the paper,
whatever the paper is, whatever the thing is.
And this was not quite the same, but the process.
The concept is very similar.
But it was similar to an agricultural screw press, is what they called it. Which there's like a screw that you would twist and it would like press down, so like the stuff would be pressed onto the paper, and then essentially these. Like the molds, I guess. They're adjustable molds is basically what they are. And you'd have all your letters, you'd shift the type around, so on and so forth. They also used like an oil-based ink, which was a little different from some of the other stuff they were using. It was more suitable for adhering to metal, whereas the last ones would use wood.
Yep.
So, and then actually the ink was carbon-based. It had like copper and lead and all sorts of other shit in it. I think it had titanium. and it was actually described as almost being more of a varnish than an ink.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, when you're thinking of just when it's always interesting to me. I always like to kind of peel back away from just, his accomplishments are amazing, but you think about like the timeline of humanity doing stuff. When you can only transfer documents in the most basic of ways. So saying, going back to somebody writing something over and over again and copying it, that really puts a gigantic sort of bottleneck on how much can literally be out there, because it's literally as much, you have to have a certain supply that can be copied on. You only have so many people who can do it, and it kind of feeds back into itself. So a lot of people back in these days were illiterate. I mean, and before that illiterate, not because they were dumb, because there was no good reason to learn how to read.
Right.
Because you never had stuff to read. And if you were literate, it was probably because you were a rich or powerful type of person, or you were some sort of influential type of person. So this is why, back in the olden days, really olden days, the very old original, Orthodox and Catholic churches and stuff, the only people who could really read were those, people in charge, so like monks and others would write stuff down and transfer documents, and then the priests and everything could like read that stuff. So really, if you're a person just sitting there getting the word read to you, I mean, you just kind of had to take their word for it that they were reading exactly what was said there. And they probably were for the most part, but there's still, when you look back at it now with your 20/20 hindsight, you have to have some doubt, because I mean, they don't know. I mean, you could say whatever you say, and then somebody's like, I don't think that's what it says. And then you're like, prove it, you dumb idiot. You can't read. So like, what are you going to say? Like, I read exactly what you're going to say. So it takes the power of literature out of a lot of people's hands when it's so focused in this like really slow moving way that really only a few people can use it. And then obviously, like you're talking about reliefs and stuff, more and more people are able to use it, but still it's pretty well in a pretty narrow band of people who can really use it effectively for any good reason, And so people, and like I said, it feeds back into itself. If you don't have to learn how to read or do that stuff, your descendants will never learn how to read because you're not going to be able to teach them, and there's no reason to teach them. And then there's an artificially small amount of people who can read, who can continue the process of like copying and doing whatever. So you always have this like artificially small amount of people who can read, and it never really grows because it doesn't have to grow, or else there's no good way for it to grow. And now all of a sudden you have this dude who, like we were talking about the reliefs, if you have to like fill an entire shed with a bunch of wood blocks that make the Bible, this guy now can literally just like take a page, take all these little letters, and just start lining them up in like the lines, these little line types. And I wish, this is sometimes I wish we were a visual podcast, because you could, there's YouTube videos of like old Gutenberg type presses that people use, and it's really interesting. You look at it now and you're like, man, that seems really inefficient. And, it kind of is compared to what we can do now, of course, because technology is what it is. But Jesus, for the time, it was like, this guy's he's the Flash of printing. He could rock out a whole page super quick, knock out, 100 copies of that page, and then go on to the next one. And it's like, it may take him a month to make a book, but he can make 100 fucking books in a month. And it's like, holy shit, dude. Like, and he does little wood block letters like you're talking about, and you store them somewhere, and he just makes each page as he wants to make it, so it doesn't take up a ton of room, so the press can be more impressive. Like you can really pump some shit out, and all of a sudden this guy is able to make a thing that says, hey, I can make, this guy has a relief that he can make a Bible every month or so. I can make 100 Bibles now, like today. I can do this. And it's like, oh shit, dude.
Right. Yeah. It's hard to like get across how important it was of what he did. Like the combination of all the things he learned to do with his mold and his movable type and whatever, like it ushered in mass production, not quite as much as it would later in like I think the scientific revolution and like Enlightenment era.
But
like,
you have to start somewhere.
Yeah, you got to start somewhere. But like he had such a huge role in like the Renaissance, which turned into the Reformation, which went into the Enlightenment, and then scientific, right? Yeah. So like he obviously wasn't just like him doing it all, but like his invention helped move all that along. And like like you were talking about earlier, with like only certain people having access, like this gave like unrestricted access to like the circulation of knowledge to people like you and me. Like anyone can get
Anybody
it.
off the street could just acquire some type of literature. And, you know, it gives more people incentive to learn how to read the language that they speak. And after they learn how to read the language they speak, oh my God, all of a sudden it opens up all these avenues. Even if it's not even near the amount of stuff we have today printed, it still is a great deal more than these people were ever going to, you know, consume in their lifetimes. And all of a sudden it just like the floodgates have opened.
Could you imagine how, like, I'm surprised he wasn't like killed or something, to be honest, because like, could you imagine all the politicians and like the clergy or like the religious elite and all those people
oh
that, like,
shit,
all these people can now have this knowledge that we can't control anymore, or like, oh no, you have ideas, and like, because ideas are power, you know?
And ideas and knowledge are power, and you can see that especially now. This is when shit really starts to hit the fan, because after this time, and it's only 1400, but I mean, not too many years after that, we start really going around exploring the world and bringing this shit everywhere, and things start to go quick. And if you have the knowledge of how things work, you are at an advantage compared to people who don't know how stuff works, and more people now have access to that stuff.
And like the perfect example, and probably one of the best examples, is Luther and his 95 Thesis. Like they say, without Gutenberg's press, there's no way he would have been able to distribute all the
95
pamphlets.
his theses. Yeah,
exactly.
He literally, he's able to print all these stuff and nail them on doors and give them to people. And you have a full blown, you know, religious reformation, you know, from what the status quo is for 1,000 years before. And he just says, "Fuck it, I don't like this. And make my own fucking thing with blackjack and hookers."
Well, and it's still around today, like the Lutheran Church. Like it's
still a big deal.
It's a huge deal. Like.
And all that is because of a guy who just must have been a real smart fucking dude, just kind of thinking, hey, what if I just make things modular? You know, what if instead of just making a big template of something, what if I just put little pieces together and I can move my little pieces around to make something look different, and all of a sudden I can just pump out whatever I want to make. You know, obviously the Bible's a popular book. It was popular then, it's popular now. So obviously the Gutenberg Bible is a super popular example of what he can do, but he made tons of those. And it's like, Jesus, before you might have had a Bible in a church, a really ornate written Bible.
Right.
And now you could pump out Bibles for every family to have, or every person in church that would go to have. And all of a sudden, you know, the words that those people are speaking now are available to, you know, everybody to see. And it's like, that's amazing. That's insane.
And so his, I don't know how much you want to get into his early life and stuff,
man,
but
do whatever you want.
So what's kind of crazy about this too is, like, I guess to get some of the controversy, you kind of need to know a little bit about him. So he was born in Mainz, I think.
Yeah, I don't know how you'd say it. I'm not a German. I am, but I'm not.
Yeah, right. Yep, same. He's the youngest son. In his family, there was more, let's see, they had to leave his town that he grew up in because some shit was going on with the patricians in the area. There's like an uprising against the patricians, and his dad was a patrician, which is, you know, like a fairly well-off kind of person. His dad worked with the ecclesiastical mint, so he already, like, he grew up knowing the trade because his dad was in the trade, which is, you know, kind of how it went. But they even
working and making like fucking well, he's like a goldsmith and a blacksmith, so like pressing metal, and having worked with metal for a long time, that kind of helps the basis of what he'll eventually, you know, make himself.
And he apparently, I think he was like involved with the seat at the assizes in the forgery cases in the like courts, which was kind of interesting, which probably is where a lot of his dad's like status came from, if I was willing to bet. But let's see here. So there was an uprising in around 1411. So he may have been 6. He may have been 15. Who knows?
He could have been a little baby boy or basically a full-blown man by this point. Who knows?
He was of age-ish somewhere around then. And they were thought to have moved to, let's see, Eltville am Rhein, which is Alta Villa, where his mother had inherited an estate. According to some historians, it basically like Jesus. You don't know much about his like early life. Like it's like, okay, he was born and then now he's this age.
And that doesn't surprise anybody because like we're just saying for the last 20 minutes, nobody was printing shit about people.
Yep.
So unless you had done something amazing or you were like some sort of nobility, there's no reason for anyone to have really written about you in any sort of way. Probably what a lot of the things that we're getting, like here's where he's from, here's what he's doing, is probably from like written records of like existence in a place. Like this is your father and he has 5 kids and Johannes is one of them, and then they kind of happen to be here while this was happening and they happen to have this thing. So then you could sort of like piece a story together based on his life. But he hadn't obviously invented his printing press yet, so there was really no reason for him to be famous in any way.
Yeah.
Yep.
So basically, for like political reasons, they think he was in Strasbourg, where he had some connections, and then it is maybe assumed he studied at the University of Erfurt. There's apparently a record of enrollment for a Johannes de Altavilla, which we just mentioned he presumably moved to after the uprising. And then for a while, you don't really know much. There's, like you said, there's not much about him, but there's a letter that indicates around 1434 that he was in Strasbourg. And then, let's see here. There was some like marriage stuff. It's not terribly important. But then, so it's around 1439 where like the press starts to come into play.
Yeah.
Apparently he was involved with, let's see, this says he was involved in a, quote, financial misadventure making polished metal mirrors which were believed to capture holy light from religious relics for sale to pilgrims in Aachen in 1439.
That sounds about like something that would happen in 1439 is some fucking polished mirror capturing this fucking holy light, and just that's a thing that people do.
And they basically, it was supposed to be an exhibit from like Charlemagne or something like that. It was anyway, who was an Emperor Charlemagne, all that.
From many years before.
Many years.
People wrote about him because he was an important person at the time.
Mr. Charles.
Yep, Mr. Charles.
Let's see here. And then that was delayed for like flooding and stuff. So like, I think that I would assume it just because of the weather and flooding, like finances just got all goofed up.
Yep.
He took some. He apparently at this time was trying to like satisfy some investors and that kind of thing. Like
he probably had his idea.
And he said he quote promised to have a secret. And they speculate that secret was his movable type of stuff. And then this is where the controversy kind of comes in, where like a Dutch man named Lorenz, I would imagine, Lorenz Koster, supposedly came up with the idea of printing as well.
And it's not surprising because a lot of times in history, and I've gone through this a bunch of times in my show too, oftentimes if you are the most famous person who have done something, it doesn't necessarily mean you're either the first or the only, especially because human beings all have this kind of, equal ability of intelligence. So it's not outside the realm of possibility that some other dude somewhere else had also thought of something like this and come up with something like that. It's just that guy didn't get, the notoriety that somebody did. And it's the way history works sometimes.
Yeah, for better or worse, it just happened. Apparently, legend has it that for Koster, the idea came to him like a ray of light.
Of course. Yeah. It's funny too because you say it like that, like he was like some sort of like divine inspiration or some muse. But you can very clearly see with Gutenberg, it was a history of his family's style of work. His father's work easily could inspire something like this. So really, it's like, hey, his dad was like a goldsmith and stuff, and Johannes is a blacksmith and a goldsmith, and he's worked with metal, and he's done all this stuff. It's not outside the realm of possibility for a guy to have a spark of thing and say, what if I just like put metal on these blocks of wood, and because I can work with metal and stuff, and then like if I just dip them in ink, what happens? And boom, he makes, it's not outside the realm of possibility to beyond saying, oh, I had like an inspiration when I was asleep one night, and all of a sudden I learned how to make a printing press, So I think personally, obviously there's controversy because, whoever claims to be first is always going to be somebody like, oh, by the way, not so much.
But I did it.
But it's like, maybe I'll believe the guy who sounds like he had a background in it before I'd believe the guy who said he had some sort of fucking God vision in his brain and said, oh, cool, I thought of the printing press and just made it. Yeah,
right.
I also did this. And first, but you can't prove anything first.
Back when they didn't like have patents being stolen and stuff. Yeah. Fuck you, it's mine.
Yeah, back when a patent didn't exist, so people were just like, I made this, and it was like, interesting, kill that guy. I made this. I did this.
Yep. So there's a gap of time where basically it said he worked on his press, he unveiled it, yada yada yada, and then in like 1448, so nearly a decade later, he was back in Mainz. Took out a loan from his brother-in-law, which people assume was for the materials to make it, right? And when it's funny, here it says they quote call it related paraphernalia, and I was like, printing paraphernalia, of course, yes. But
talking about weed now.
Yep, Gutenberg.
I feel like anytime you ever hear the word paraphernalia, it's only ever in reference to fucking drugs now. Oh, like nobody ever uses that word, which is a good word. Paraphernalia is a really it's a nice word. Fun little word. You never use it for like, fun stuff like, oh, I went to a party and they had a ton of like balloons and streamers and paraphernalia for parties. Even when I say the word now, I'm like, yeah, it's a party that they balloons and streamers and also like weed and heroin and meth everywhere. So, printing.
Yep.
He gets a loan from his step bro, or not step bro, his bro-in-law.
Yep.
And for printing paraphernalia.
Yeah. So
supposedly, probably.
And it says that he may have been familiar with intaglio, I don't know words, printing. And it is claimed that he had worked with, hold on, let me
get through your notes a little bit
here.
Explain
what that is. Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. It's basically that's right. It's like the opposite of a direct like relief print.
Yeah.
Is what that is. The intaglio, I would imagine. Sounds like it wouldn't have the J sound. Anyway, it's claimed that he'd been working on copper engravings and that kind of thing with an artist known as the Master of Playing Cards, which sounds like something out of like fucking Final Fantasy. It
sounds like it's like an anime character. Steve Gutenberg. Johannes goes on an adventure to meet the Master of Playing Cards. It's like a quest he opened up, and he has to go. He has to go hang out with the Master of Playing Cards for a second to like unlock a skill. His
first season is learning the skill. Yep, crazy hair. I just imagine him with basically, I'm thinking of Yu-Gi-Oh! Because of cards now. And like I think of Pegasus and his like crazy ass hair. Anyway, he's the Master of Playing Cards.
He's the Master of Playing Cards.
Anyway, should look more up on that guy. He sounds kind of interesting.
He sounds like an interesting dude. Maybe we'll talk about him later.
Right.
Who knows?
Master of Playing Cards.
The Master of Playing Cards.
But then it says his press was in operation by 1450. There was a German poem that had been printed, and it was possibly the first thing printed on his press, which is cool.
Yeah.
And then get this. This is kind of interesting too.
Yeah.
It says that Gutenberg, he was able to convince a very wealthy moneylender, that people may know as Faust, Johann Faust, for a loan of 800 guilders, which I don't really know how much that would.
It's like just fake money. This sounds more and more like some weird old anime that we've just made up.
You got 800 gil.
Yeah, you got 800 gil. It is Final Fantasy. It truly is.
So he got 800 guilders, however much that's worth, to work on more of this stuff. And then his Faust's son-in-law also joined the enterprise, so on and so forth. His son-in-law worked as a scribe in Paris, and he apparently is credited with designing maybe some of the first like typefaces that was used.
Like different fonts and shit and different sizes of type.
Yep.
How fun. How fun to be the people who invented all the different fonts, or at least started that whole fucking nonsense.
And I don't, we would need to get in touch with like an advertising friend of ours or like a marketing friend, because I don't know a whole lot about typefaces. But
Just talked to my wife. I think she did advertising and marketing in college. And it would have been perfect for her to be here, but she's off doing actual work today, and we're just fucking around.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, you should totally ask Emily about that.
Yeah.
I'm sure she has a lot more to say about typeface than I can.
Than either of us really know anything about. So.
Yep. But yeah, I guess his workshop was in Hombrecht. A distant relative owned that area. It's not clear when he conceived the whole Bible project, but he apparently borrowed another 800 guilders from Faust in like 1452. And then some court case stuff happened because apparently Faust was like, he wanted his money back. He's like, well, what the hell, man? Like, he accused him of misusing his funds.
Yeah.
And I don't know what they mean by that. Like,
you probably just didn't think that, oh, I thought I bought this, but all of a sudden you have this thing. Like, what the fuck,
right?
man?
Like, this isn't what I thought you were going to do.
Exactly what you're going to do. Yeah.
But
even though what he did with it was fucking super impressive.
Yeah.
Insanely
absolutely
cool. But
and it's crazy because basically Gutenberg is one of those kind of sad stories where he kind of got a shitty lot at the end. So basically, the court decided in favor of Faust.
Yep.
They gave him control over the Bible printing workshop and half of the Bibles that he had printed. So I don't know how much you could sell that stuff, like what 200 guilders? I don't fucking know. But anyway, he had access to half of all the Bibles.
Yeah, so a bunch of what Gutenberg basically couldn't afford to do anyway. He just took half of it and he was like, it's mine now.
Yep.
Like, have fun.
He essentially went bankrupt.
Yeah. As what happens with a lot of these fucking guys who come up with some shit like this, they're just like poor.
Right.
They die alone, bankrupt and shit, because nobody understands like the magnitude of these things till many years later.
Right.
Often.
So but apparently he had another small printing shop, participated in more like Bible printing, that kind of stuff. It says around Bamberg in 1459, which, let's see, it seems that he had to at least supply the type for it, but it's hard to know because apparently none of his books has his name on it.
He just print them, but he never like said, "Hey, this is printed by the Gutenberg boys."
Yep, exactly.
It was just I just did it. The end.
So like, could you imagine like having some ancient person finding like, oh, I found this old ass Bible in my grandparents' castle's attic or some shit, and like, I don't know, like, what if it was the Gutenberg Bible? You wouldn't know. It doesn't have his name in it.
It's true. I feel like you probably could know, because I think they can find out these days, probably from like carbon dating. You could probably even find out like what probably year it was maybe done. But I think they all looked fairly similar enough. I'm sure there were copycats after his Bible was made, because once you make something iconic, fucking people come around. Once they figure out their printing press, they probably go, oh, well, this Bible that Gutenberg had printed was so popular, we're just going to make ours look the same, so people want to have it too. And then you get a whole bunch of fakes or knockoffs or whatever you want to call it out there. So it would be kind of tough to figure out whether you have the genuine article or not, for sure.
And it's also maybe possible that the Catholicon sounds kind of rad. Catholicon dictionary. There was 300...
Sounds like another relic that our character needs to pick up pretty quick. The Catholicon.
Necronomicon, but like the Catholicon dictionary. Apparently 300 copies were printed in Mainz in 1460, and they were possibly done in his like small shop that he had. Meanwhile, the Faust and Schoeffer shop, which is Faust's son-in-law, was the first in Europe to bring out a book with a printer's name on it. So they were the ones who were like, hey, we're going to put our names on this shit. And it was a Psalter, like Psalms, like Psalter. And then of course it made no mention of Gutenberg, even though it probably it might have even used his actual press. Yeah. Because I think Faust got it, something like that.
Yeah.
But then his later life gets even more kind of just him, I guess.
He just sort of fades off and
yeah.
puffs out.
Well, so it says in 1462, there was a diocesan feud, and there was like, it was sacked by the Archbishop, Adolf von Nassau, and Gutenberg was exiled as an old man. So he moved back to, it looks like Eltville, where he may have supervised more printing and that,
Probably.
That kind of
it's
stuff.
all he knows at this point.
Yep.
It's probably just what he's going to do till he takes his last breath. So
yeah. So, but I mean, I guess a little bit of a silver lining. His achievements were recognized. Where was it? He was given the Hoffman, is what it said, or the title of Hoffman rather. So like a gentleman of the court.
Yeah.
So he was given a stipend, and like, it looks like he got 2,180 liters of grain, and then some wine, 2,000 liters of wine tax free.
That's a lot of wine.
So yeah,
Holy shit.
he's exiled with a lot of grain and
and wine. So yeah, exile's probably not that terrible. I wonder how many guilders that's worth. Who knows?
Right. But yeah, I don't know. He died in 1468, so he had 3 years to get through all that wine, I guess.
Yeah. Probably passed his wine off to whatever children he had made. So yeah, I feel like the biggest thing with Gutenberg here wasn't necessarily, and obviously at this point people were smart enough to say, holy shit, we can print stuff. Obviously Gutenberg's like a genius in some way. We're not going to give him the genius label maybe just yet because this guy's like suing him, or it's foggy, Yeah. And then eventually, so he's still recognized during the time that he's alive that, hey, you made something pretty fucking cool, dude, because, but nobody during this time could have ever, like we were talking about earlier, like understood the magnitude of what this means, because once you start a piece of technology, like, and it's good, all people are going to do is continue to work on it, improve. And it gets to the point where you can print shit just mega fast, from the point where you're just printing books to then you're printing daily pamphlets and newspapers where you're just cranking shit out, new stuff all the time. And it's like, none of that would be possible without somebody coming up with a way to do it quick in the first place.
So let's put some perspective on this real quick.
Yeah.
It says, so the European output of printed books circa 1450 to 1800.
So from the time he started his press to 1800.
Yep. So in the 15th century, it was, God, like there's not even a number on the scale.
Yeah, because the first half of that century was nothing until he came up with his thing.
So like the 16th century, it was right around 200 million, I believe.
That's a lot already.
But then by the 18th century, it goes up to just under 1 billion. Like it just spikes almost like by half, or it doubles.
Yeah,
like every century it doubles.
Yep.
And it's ludicrous to think like how big of a
deal
thing that was.
This is,
like it's insane. And then I guess some of his legacy you could talk about a little bit. A lot of the printing apparently shifted to Venice which helped a lot with like the Latin works and things like that, which is great.
Greek works probably, I suppose, as well. Some classical work.
So that was a huge thing. And then there's the Gutenberg Museum, which is in like Mainz. And then one of the coolest things, I think, is called Project Gutenberg, which is the oldest digital library commemorating him. And basically what Project Gutenberg is like, I'm surprised how early, and by early, I mean, it's still relatively new in the grand scheme, but when
the project started,
it started in 1971, man.
Yeah.
Like they were
digitizing.
Yeah. They were digitizing stuff in 1971.
Yep.
Started by a guy named Michael S. Hart. And basically he started it to digitize and like archive classic works and so on. It has like 57,000 titles in it. So like
all for free.
Yep.
You can just go and read whatever you want. 57,000 books. Yep.
It's insane. Yeah, that's probably one of the most like nods to him.
Yeah, a straight up nod to say, yeah, this is definitely like, this is Gutenberg. This is who we're referring to, is this guy.
Right.
For sure.
And I mean, beyond that, like, I guess there's I've got some other stuff in my notes, but
Yeah.
it's whatever. But then we were talking like before we started recording, but like how this was just the West, of course. Like they were already doing some printing stuff over in Asia,
Yep.
And the East. Like a couple hundred years before he was doing his thing.
Yep.
But whatever. I would imagine, like you were talking about, it probably was more suitable to like the way their language is written and things like that. But I mean, it doesn't necessarily surprise me that, like you said, I mean, humans have been doing this, the same idea doesn't just roll around into like one person.
In one person. Usually there's multiple people have multiple of the same idea, then it always becomes this fuzzy thing where people go, oh, did somebody steal somebody's idea or copy somebody's idea without permission or whatever? And especially in these times when people are so fucking far apart, you tend to kind of side with the fact that, people probably just had a parallel thinking event where it's like, this guy thought of the same thing that you did. It is what it is. Either they got there first or you did or something, whatever it is, you both got to the same spot eventually, separate of one another.
And in the East, obviously, they were...
it's so fucking far away.
And they were so fucking huge, too. Like, I'm sure... I'd have to look into it, but I'm sure whoever, like, started it over there was a huge deal. Like, made a huge deal all over that area, whereas, like, Gutenberg in the West, like Europe, and then it spread... around and then so what else? I feel like there was something I was going to talk about with the method, but maybe not.
That's okay. I feel like we've covered a pretty good chunk of kind of what it is. I feel like the biggest part about Gutenberg's story really isn't exactly about the man himself, although it is interesting to kind of see like where he came from, what he did, and like kind of what happened to him. It's really just just look at this insane thing that this guy did and look at our society now. And you can't just say, well, of course, if we didn't have Gutenberg, we wouldn't have this, because somebody probably would have come up with something. But because of what Gutenberg made and what people did, we were able to print and make more printed books and works, and more people learned how to read, and those people passed on to their kids how to read, and more and more and more and more people became literate. And more works came out there. More novelists started to exist. So a lot of the classic work that you see from the 17th and 18th and 19th century wouldn't have existed without a way to publish that work. And a lot of people wouldn't continually, like Mike, be inspired to write and read if you didn't have anything to write and read about, So it directly affects you because it without this guy, you don't have whatever part of you wouldn't exist anymore. I'm holding my phone in my hand right now. I have, access to most of the world's works, like in a very small handheld device. And it's crazy to think that this started back with a dude who was just putting little blocks in a line and printing it with ink and stuff. And all of a sudden the world becomes a lot bigger and a lot smaller at the same time. It becomes bigger because everything explodes with knowledge, but it becomes smaller because we can all be interconnected and we could all read what other people are thinking. I mean, reading is just basically telepathy between two people. I mean, you fucking put words on a page and then you read them and it's all of a sudden in your brain now. Right. It's kind of a weird thing.
So a fun story really quick that is just very much this time of the world history around this time. So with Faust, you might know already, but he was like accused of being like involved in witchcraft and like selling his soul to the devil.
Sounds about right.
Because some of his Bibles had red ink that people like, that's fucking blood. Witch.
You witch. You killed young virgin ladies to make that red type, you fucking witch. You wizard. So you're a wizard, Faust.
It's just good to know, like, I think he was even thrown in jail on charges of black magic and shit like that. So anyway, it's good that we have knowledge and things don't, like, okay, this isn't a thing, like,
obviously still some people probably still do think it's a thing, but it's far less than probably who did at this point think that was a legitimate thing that happened, that you printed with blood. you witch, you fucking black magic demon. Faust. He's like, no man, I just put, okay, well I guess I'm in prison now. Oh shit.
Whoops. I guess this happened. Yeah, I think that's hilarious, that story.
It's kind of a fun little aside to just be like, hey, this guy is making a scientific achievement in the midst of just insanity that fucking people are still in the middle of. Like, the world's a weird place, and sometimes I always think about how we've gotten to where we've gotten and how much cool shit we have now and how we could easily just not have all that cool shit because some fucking crazy person who imagination gets the best of them and mind runs wild and they believe in some sort of insanity. And it's like, well, and they go fucking, kill somebody who's like a smart person. And that's probably happened plenty of times in history. Both people we probably know about and people we don't know about. I mean, who knows who's been just like some dude with like an idea got murdered and it's like he would have been the next, big thing, but you never know now because it's the end of it,
Right. Well, and it's funny you say that because last week, so I was listening to you and Aaron talk, and I mean, same kind of shit happened when Tesla lost all his research, his life's worth of research, like the amount of knowledge we don't have because of that.
We'll never have.
And throughout history, I mean, Alexander the Great destroying the Alexandria library, right?
It's just, just things, the Mongol horde coming into Baghdad and sacking and burning the library there and basically pushing back fucking Islamic culture like 1,000 years because he decided he wanted to kill and maim and murder everybody because him and his court are bloodthirsty, insane people. You have all these like scientific, like heavy, like forward thinking people, and then you just blast their ass, basically like a fucking horse nuke back to the Stone Age. And it's like, well, I mean, probably a lot of the reason why, honestly, and this is a total aside, the way the Middle East is now is probably because fucking the Mongol horde fucked them up so bad that things never really recovered,
Right.
Fucking potatoes in Ireland fucking destroyed that goddamn place. Like, there were like 9 million people, I think, at one time in Ireland, and the troubles and the blight and everything just like destroyed that country, where they still don't have as many people in that country now. Like, the population's never recovered. It's fucking 2018 and there's only like 6 million people in Ireland. Like, you would think something like that would bounce back, but sometimes shit really fucks something up. And it doesn't, it's the humanity and the way the world works is a weird and crazy thing. So, the moral of the story is if you know somebody who's smart, you have a smart kid or whatever, like, protect that idea with all you have, because it may be the next big, thing. Maybe not, but maybe that's the whole point. Could be. It might be.
Could be.
So I think with that, I'll end the episode here. We've been going for quite a bit of time, but it's been super fun. It's flown right by.
Indeed.
You can find me on Twitter at Kyle Steinhauser. You can find the show on Twitter at The Couch Pod. I should post those a little bit more often than I do, but I don't. I'll try. Whatever. We'll see how it goes. Search Knowledge from the Couch podcast on Facebook. You can find us there. I usually post when the episodes go live every single week and kind of go from there. You can find me on Instagram if you want. I don't really post a ton of stuff there, but I am there. Search Kyle F. Steinhauser on that one. Email the show, knowledgecouch@gmail.com if you want to. And you can find this podcast literally anywhere podcasts can be found. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and everything else in between. Just search Knowledge from the Couch podcast. And if you see a picture of 3 people sitting on a couch, that's the correct one. That's the one you want to listen to. Mike, what do you got plug-wise? Where can people find you? If you want to be found.
Pretty much just Twitter. I mean, you can find me at Bearded Bets.
Bearded TTS.
Correct. Yep. Facebook, I mean, I'm there. I just I don't really use it for much, and I don't really anyway. Like,
it's the way things are.
Yeah. And you don't need my email. It's fine. Yeah. And unless you're like a publisher or something, like, that somehow stumbled upon this and want to talk to me, or an agent, then sure. Hit me up on Twitter. I'll contact you there.
Hit him up at Bearded Bets on Twitter. He will get to you there. In the show notes and stuff, I will also publish like links to Mike's work and everything if you want to go read that kind of stuff. And yes, also go to my Patreon and put a little money towards this fucking show. That would be super cool. Patreon.com/Kyle has a podcast, because I do. I have one of those, and you're listening to it right this very second. Guys, I think that's all we have for this week. Another nice, lengthy, fun episode I've had. I'm really happy that I finally decided to take a dip into the ocean of guests. It has been very rewarding for me to have people come over and talk with me. it's made the podcast better, I think. I've had a lot of positive reviews from the first two that people have enjoyed listening to those. I feel like it helps get people a different perspective and hear a different voice than just mine, and it's kind of a nice little break from just the repetitiveness of just doing like a single one-off kind of podcast, you know.
Indeed.
So thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it. John, Mike's brother, if you're listening, you are invited at some point. Just let me know when you want to come on, and we'll do something similar. And anybody else, if you are, I would say within listening or driving distance of me, if you live here in Lincoln, Nebraska, or if you're close by and you want to come be on the show, I don't give a shit what you want to talk about. Honestly, if you don't even come with like a subject prepared, I don't fucking care. Like, we can talk. Mike and I talk for like half an hour plus about nothing at all, and it just is what it is. I like doing that. It's a fun little excursion. So if you're interested in being on the show, let me know. We can make something happen. I know the holidays are kind of tough for people to get around and do stuff now, but if you have a free day and I have a free day, we should get together and chit chat and have a little fun. So until next week. So I know last week I said that maybe this week's would be a solo one, but then we kind of got together here. So 51 today's is going to be another guested episode. Eventually you'll probably hear a few solo ones here and there because I don't have unlimited guests. So but yeah, we'll probably get back to seeing or hearing some of the regular stuff, but either way it works. Thanks for continually supporting the podcast and tuning in. And guys, live long, as Spock would say, the Star Trek character Spock, and prosper.